Last weekend, someone told me, "Artis, you have no empathy." And honestly, I understand why she said it. One of our people had just been hit by a racing cart. He was hurt. He had to go to the hospital. And my reaction was probably not what most people expected. I said, he was warned more than once. He made the choice. And now there is a price. Sounds brutal? Maybe it is. But let me explain what actually happened. And then you can decide for yourself. Because this story is not really about a racing accident. It is about something much bigger. Responsibility, choices, and the price we sometimes have to pay for our own decisions. So the question today is simple. When something goes wrong because of your own choices, who should carry the responsibility? And how much empathy should we expect from everyone else? Last weekend, we had the second stage of the European Electric Karting League in Jelgava, Latvia. And it was a great weekend. Great racing, a lot of emotions, a lot of people working together, drivers fighting for every position, exactly what racing should be. But motorsport also has risks. During practice, one of our team members was filming too close to the track. Too close. The officials noticed it and they warned him, "Move back, this is dangerous." Later, during the final, he was close to the track again. And another experienced driver warned him again. Basically, don't stand there, something can happen. And unfortunately, something did. During the start procedure when everything became aggressive and fast, a cart hit him. For a few seconds, nobody knew how serious it was. He went to the hospital, doctors checked him, and luckily, nothing was seriously broken. He was badly bruised, but he was going to be okay. And that should probably have been the end of the story. But for me, that was actually where the interesting part started. While we were sitting in the grandstand, we started talking about what had happened, and I said something like, "Honestly, he brought this on himself." People immediately looked at me, because apparently that was not the answer they expected, but I knew the background. This wasn't the first dangerous situation. He had been warned before. People had repeatedly told him to pay more attention while filming, and this time he had been warned directly at the track more than once. Then one woman said to me, "Artis, that's cruel. The person should always come first." And that sentence stayed in my head because is the person always first? Of course, we should care about people, but I don't think the answer is that simple. For me, there is a big difference between something bad happening to you and something happening because you keep ignoring the same risk. Think about something very simple. If I tell you, "Don't touch that, it's hot," and you touch it anyway, you get burned. Okay, maybe you didn't believe me. Maybe you didn't understand the risk. Maybe you made a mistake. We all do. But then I tell you again, "Don't touch it. It's hot." And you touch it again and again and again. At some point, your hand is going to teach you something that my words couldn't. There is a famous saying that is often credited to Einstein. If you keep doing the same thing again and again, but expect a different result, something is wrong with your thinking. And that is exactly my point. You make a mistake once, okay, learn from it. You make it twice, okay, maybe you need another lesson. But if people warn you again and again, and you still choose to do exactly the same thing, at some point I stop seeing bad luck. I see a choice. And this is where my empathy starts to change. I have empathy for pain. I have empathy for accidents. I have empathy when somebody simply didn't know. But I find it very difficult to feel sorry for the same irresponsible choice repeated again and again, especially when that choice can hurt somebody else. Because now it's not only about you anymore, your decision creates risk for everyone around you. And this is where I think we sometimes make a mistake as a society. We think that being kind means protecting people from every consequence. I don't agree. Sometimes consequences are exactly how we learn. If every time I make a stupid decision, somebody comes and removes the prize for me, why should I change? Think about it. I make the mistake. You protect me from the result. I make it again. You save me again. What am I learning? Nothing. I don't become stronger. I don't become smarter. I simply learn that somebody will always come and save me. And if enough of us start thinking like that, I don't think we become a stronger society. I think we become a society that gets very good at protecting bad decisions. And for me, those are two completely different things. Helping a person is one thing. Protecting the same bad decision again and again is something completely different. And that brings me to the part I think is even more important. Because when one person makes a bad decision, very often that person is not the only one who has to pay for it. This is where my thinking is probably different from many people. I believe every choice has a price. Sometimes the price is small, sometimes it is huge, and sometimes you don't know the price until you have to pay it. If nobody warned you, that's one thing. If something completely unexpected happens, that's different. But if people tell you, don't do this once, twice, again, and you still choose to do it, then at some point it becomes your decision. And with that decision comes responsibility. That doesn't mean I want something bad to happen to you. Of course not. I would much rather you listen the first time and nothing happens. But when the consequence finally comes, my first reaction is not always, poor guy. My reaction is, okay, what happened? Why did it happen? What did we learn? And how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? Because feeling sorry for someone doesn't automatically solve the problem. Sometimes the lesson is more important than making the person feel comfortable. But there is another part of this story that I think is even more important. When one person makes a bad decision, very often that person is not the only one who pays for it. Think about what happened here. There was a driver in that cart. How does he feel after hitting someone? There are organizers responsible for the event. There is a team. There are people who now have to stop what they are doing. Someone has to go to the hospital. Someone has to take him home. The filming work he was responsible for is no longer being done. And in a more serious accident, there could even be legal consequences. So when someone asked me, where is your empathy? My answer was, I do have empathy, maybe just not for the person you expected. At that moment, I was thinking about everyone else, the driver, the organizers, the team, the people who now had to deal with the result of one person's decision. And that raises another question. Why should 10 other people pay for a choice that one person made? But here is the important part. I don't have one rule for other people and another rule for myself. No, I use exactly the same logic on myself. Let's say I do something stupid. I know it's a bad idea. I do it anyway. And the next day I'm sick. What happens normally? Most people would stay home. I'm sick. I need to recover. I need some rest. And everybody around them is supposed to understand, maybe even feel sorry for them. But in my head, there is another question. Why are other people now supposed to pay for my decision? If I knew the risk, if I made the choice, and now I'm paying the price, that's my responsibility. Of course, sometimes you are simply sick. Sometimes something happens that you could never control. That's different. I'm talking about situations where you know exactly how you got there. If I promised my team that something would be finished today and 100 other people are depending on that result, why should all of them now have a problem because yesterday I made a stupid decision? They didn't make that decision. I did. So why should they pay my price? For me, this is very simple. My decision, my consequence, my price. And yes, sometimes that means I have to work when I'm tired. Sometimes I have to continue when I don't feel good. Sometimes I have to work another 10 hours because I promised a result and completely underestimated how difficult it would be. I'm not saying people should ignore serious illness or injury. That would be stupid too. I'm talking about responsibility, about doing everything you reasonably can to make sure your own bad decision doesn't become everybody else's problem. Because sometimes a result is not only about you, maybe 10 people depend on it, maybe 100, maybe their families, their jobs, their businesses, their next decisions. You never really know how far one broken promise can travel. And this is where people sometimes tell me, Artis, you have no empathy. And I ask myself, do I really have no empathy, or am I simply putting my empathy somewhere else? Maybe my empathy is with the 100 people who did nothing wrong, but now have to deal with the consequences of one person's decision. That is a big difference for me. I've made many stupid decisions in my life. Trust me, some cost me money, some cost me years, and some cost me things much more important than money. But if it was my decision, I don't expect the world to carry the price for me. First, I look at myself. What did I do? Why did I do it? What is the price? And what do I need to do now? Because for me, responsibility starts exactly there. Not when everything goes right. It starts when your own decision goes wrong. Maybe this way of thinking comes from my childhood. If you watch the first episode, you probably understand a little bit more. Where I grew up, if something needed to be done, you did it. If you didn't cook, there might be nothing to eat. If you didn't bring the wood didn't magically arrive. Nobody was coming to solve everything for you. You learned very early your actions create results, good actions, bad actions, sometimes stupid actions, and all of them have consequences. Maybe I carried too much of that thinking into my adult life. Maybe sometimes I'm too hard. That is possible. But responsibility became extremely important to me because I believe we have something very powerful. We can think, we can learn, we can understand danger, we can make decisions, and when we make the wrong decision, we can learn from it. For me, that is one of the most important abilities we have. Not avoiding every mistake, that's impossible, but understanding I did this happened. What do I change next time? I sometimes use a phrase that people really don't like. I say, biologically, I'm basically around 80 kilos of meat. Sounds terrible, I know. But stay with me. Our bodies are biological machines. We eat, we sleep, we grow, we get older, and one day we die. That part is nature. What interests me is what we do with the brain we were given. Can I learn? Can I become better? Can I control myself? Can I understand risk? Can I make a difficult decision? And when that decision goes wrong, can I say, yes, that was me. Not my boss, not my parents, not society, not the weather, me. I made that decision. For me, this ability to think, learn, and take responsibility is one of the things that makes us human. And maybe that sounds harsh, but I think responsibility gives us power. Because if everything is always somebody else's fault, then you also give somebody else control over your life. And I've tested this thinking on myself more times than I probably should have. There have been moments in my life when my own decisions put me very close to the edge. Really close. Some risks were worth taking, some looking back were probably completely stupid, and I paid for them physically, financially, emotionally, sometimes for years. But every time something went badly wrong, I tried to ask myself the same questions. What did I do? Why did I do it? What did I miss? And what do I change now? Not why did this happen to me, but what can I learn from this? Maybe that is why my reaction at the racetrack was so direct. I wasn't thinking this person deserves to suffer. Absolutely not. I was thinking this happened. There were warnings. There was a decision. Now there is a consequence. So what are we going to learn from it? Because if we learn nothing, then the pain was completely wasted. A few days later, I'm still thinking about that conversation. The person should always come first, maybe, but I think I would say it differently. People matter, absolutely, but responsibility matters too, and sometimes helping someone doesn't mean protecting them from every consequence. Sometimes it means helping them understand why that consequence happened. I know some of you will completely disagree with me. That's okay. Maybe you think I'm too hard. Maybe sometimes I am. But I'm not asking you to think like me. I'm telling you how I think and why. Because maybe the real question is not, do we have empathy? Maybe the harder question is, where does empathy end and personal responsibility begin? I have my answer. You may have a completely different one. And I would actually like to hear it, because this story is not finished. I told you that some of my own decisions brought me very close to the edge, more than once. Some of those stories I've never told publicly, but we'll get there. See you in the next one.